Arunya sat stiff and tense beside her defense attorney inside the hot Florida courtroom. Even though she didn't show even a single hint of emotion as the trial proceedings ended, deep inside, Arunya was full of anxiety. This looked like a straightforward cut-and-dry case, but the jury didn't think so. It took the jury 7 hours of deliberation to reach their verdict. Most people immediately believed Arunya was guilty, and the verdict should have been decided within a half hour. But to the surprise of the general public, the jury spent a far greater amount of time deliberating than anyone could have ever imagined. The jury turned their verdict over to the judge, and then, after reading their decision written on the little piece of paper that was handed to him, he turned to Arunya. Arunya continued to maintain her composure on the outside and did not react when the judge announced the verdict. Arunya Rouch was born in Thailand, where she lived in absolute poverty. She wanted more for herself, and so, looking for a better life, she decided it was in her best interest to pack up all of her stuff and move to the United States. Once she was there, she applied for her American citizenship and then received it shortly after that. Arunya was happy. She settled into her new life in the United States, she got married, and then she started working at the Publix store in Tarpon Springs, which is an employee-owned grocery store chain. Her husband also worked at the Publix store, but he was at a different location. Arunya's husband, Tom Rouch, was a trainer for the company, and he had the job of opening seafood departments inside of the new stores. Arunya was a dedicated employee. She enjoyed keeping her department super neat and clean. She liked it to be presentable for the public. Arunya took a lot of pride in her work, and that meant that sometimes she would arrive to work a little bit earlier than when her shift was supposed to start. She did this just so that she could spend a little bit of extra time making her area perfect. And even though it was against store policy to start working before clocking in, Arunya didn't really take that policy very seriously. Most people seen her dedication as a positive trait, but there was one person who worked at the Publix store with her who did not think so. Not one bit. His name was Gregory Janowski. March 30th of 2010 was one of those days that Arunya arrived to work a little bit early. The problem was that Gregory Janowski seen Arunya working before her shift started, and he decided he was going to do something about it this time. So, Gregory walked up to Arunya and told her that he was going to report her for infringing on company policy. This was the absolute limit for Arunya, and she quickly whipped around and looked him dead in the eye, saying something along the lines of, "If you mess with my work, I will kill you." Greg had been a problem for Arunya for as long as she could remember. He was a bully, and he loved to bully Arunya. He was constantly saying things to her like, "Get back in your hole," meaning get back to your own department. But because Arunya was Thai, this was more of a racist comment, and everybody knew it. He constantly picked on her and criticized her work. Gregory would bully Arunya so much at the store that she would go home and spend hours crying. She had become depressed, and she told her husband that she was mentally sick from it. She couldn't understand why Gregory wouldn't just leave her alone. Arunya's husband had even confronted Gregory in the past, asking him to stop bullying his wife. But Gregory just laughed at him and walked away, leaving Tom standing there without any resolution. And then the worst thing that could have happened to Arunya finally happened. Arunya was fired from her job at the Publix store. The reason she was fired was because Gregory reported her for infringing on company policy, and then he proceeded to lodge a complaint that Arunya had threatened to kill him. Arunya was devastated. Her job meant everything to her, and she felt like she was a complete disgrace to her family because she was fired. She had worked so hard and couldn't believe this was happening. Her work, that she cared so much about, was no longer hers. Arunya was in a daze as she gathered up her belongings from her locker, and then she left the Publix store completely devastated and angry with Gregory as well as the management of the store for what they had done to her and what they had allowed Gregory to get away with. When Arunya got home, she wasn't doing very well. Her mind was sort of in a blur and she was walking around kind of like she was in a confused state. And it was when she was in this state of mind that she went to where her husband stored their 9mm handgun. Arunya took it out of its case, placed it in her bag, and then she got in her car and headed back to the public store. And as soon as she pulled into the parking lot, she seen what she was looking for. Arunya parked and got out of her car. And then she proceeded to walk straight across the parking lot towards another car that was parked in the parking lot as well. Gregory didn't see it coming when he found himself looking out his car window into the face of Arunya Rouch. Without any hesitation, Arunya pulled the 9mm handgun out of her bag, pointed it at Gregory, and pulled the trigger, shooting him point blank and killing him on the spot. Gregory slumped forward in his seat, dead. Satisfied that Gregory was dead, Arunya then turned around and ran inside the public store. Inside the building, Arunya didn't waste any time in there either, and headed straight towards the manager's office, which was located upstairs. She was going to make them pay for disgracing her the way they had. She reached their office and walked in ready to shoot everyone in the room. But, by some miracle, the room was empty. By this time, there was mass panic in the public store downstairs. Shoppers had seen Arunya walking through the store with the gun, and people outside had seen her shoot Gregory in his car. The public store was in utter chaos as shoppers screamed and they dropped their groceries and they ran for their lives. One witness to the shooting outside had called the police, and within minutes, officers had arrived at the store. And when Arunya seen them, she raised her gun and fired at them. The officers responded by drawing their guns, quickly firing back at Arunya, and after a brief shootout in the store, Arunya was shot, finally bringing to an end the chaos inside the public store. Arunya was immediately arrested, and then she was taken by ambulance to the hospital where doctors were able to stabilize her, and she ultimately survived her injuries. Arunya did not have a history of mental illness, and even though her defense attorneys tried to claim temporary insanity triggered by the bullying and the sudden loss of her job, Arunya was found guilty of 1 count of first-degree murder, 2 counts of attempted first-degree murder, and 2 counts of aggravated assault. So that's going to wrap it up for this video. Please remember to slap the like button because that is super helpful. And if you haven't already and you like this story, I would suggest hammering the subscribe button as well. And I will see you again later.